Welcome to the Mojo Mundi podcast, where it's all about magic, manifesting, and movement. I'm Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch, and this is why your path matters. When I finally embraced the idea that I was going to close my psychotherapy practice and follow my calling more deeply into spirituality, I was compelled in part by an awareness of how religious leaders, inspirational speakers, and spiritual coaches can inadvertently or intentionally limit, mold, or control their audiences, interfering with seekers' innate relationship with the all that is, and undermining their ability to recognize and follow the inner compass. My husband and I have been watching the Netflix documentary, Trust Me, The False Prophet. It brought me back to earlier documentaries that came across my radar in the year leading up to closing my practice. These programs were a parade of the ways that religious or pseudo-spiritual practices built on obedience, sin, hierarchy, isolation, and exclusivity can undermine and destabilize vulnerable, sincere aspirants. The fallout of these practices, whether intentional or unintended, is damage, sometimes irreparable damage, to the victim's vital relationship with deity. I'm not going to launch into a deep exploration of cults. There are plenty of well-qualified experts and enthusiastic laypersons offering all kinds of information, suggestions, interventions, and deterrents related to cults. What I do want to explore is the less obvious ways we abdicate self-determination and inner guidance in our spiritual lives, the subtle consequences that may arise from such choices, and the place of eclecticism as a legitimate approach to spiritual practice and soulful expansion. As I contemplate the roots of religion, it makes sense to me that humans would develop a unified practice of shared ritual. Before the advent of planes, trains, automobiles, bicycles, before the advent of domesticated beasts of burden, our ancestors were born, lived, died, and were buried on the same land where their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on, were born, lived, died, and were buried, generation after generation. The soil out of which life arose and to which all returned in death, the plants, the animals, the air and water carried a consistent vibration of which our ancestors were a part. In this kind of stable, energetic environment, it makes sense to me that our spiritual practices were communal and consistent, mirroring the spirit of the land. Even nomadic tribes moved along a cyclic path. For example, the indigenous peoples of what is now the state of California, including the Tongva, Uhaviatum, Katanamuk, and Chumash, traveled from the lowlands to the mountains and beyond, but always returning to the same areas season after season, generation upon generation. Guided by the rhythms of the seasons, the wisdom of the animals and plants, and each individual's connection to the environment and the community, spiritual practice was in every action, and the communities lived in unified motion, like a flock of birds. Within banded spiritual practice among ancient and indigenous cultures, individual connection to deities was also present. There was a weaving and harmonious flow from the individual to the community body and back again. The vision quest of the Plains people of what is now referred to as the United States is a well-known and studied example of the presence of individual spiritual action and connection with Creator in the context of communal beliefs and practices. I imagine that the Plains people recognized and felt akin to the wisdom of the elk and bison herds and the wolf packs, where there is a similar flow of individual to group and back. In a January 24, 2022 guest essay in the Navajo Times, Kenneth G. White Jr. refers to this quote attributed to Crazy Horse, visionary leader of the Oglala Lakota Sioux. "I salute the light within your eyes, where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at that center within you, and I am in that place within me, we shall be one." When you are at that center within you, and I am in that place within me, we shall be one. Individual to community, to cosmos, to community, to individual. The great circle, the sacred spiral. By allowing a complex process of spiritual relationship and practice to evolve, ancients and indigenous peoples embrace the power and intricacy of co-creation, the living web of the manifested and the potential. This approach supports, honors, and collaborates with manifesting, creativity, and diversity. A subtler form of allowing individualism and embracing complexity is evident in ancient and indigenous practices of honoring local deities and adopting, sharing, trading, or stealing others' traditions and rituals. Among the ancient Greeks, it was important to discover and honor the deities that were worshipped in each community or wild place one might visit. The ancient Romans practiced cultural and religious syncretism, assimilating and accommodating the deities and rituals of the people they conquered. My first West African dance teacher, Yusuf Kumbasa, tells the story of a certain mask dance belonging to a specific powerful local spirit. A man from one village discovered another man from a neighboring village dancing in secret with the spirit in the forest. He hid and watched the dance until he could remember it, taking the secret dance back to his village and taking the power with it. The rise of structured religions, in contrast with intricate, shared communal rituals, added a new layer to human spiritual practices and beliefs. While the term religio-political was coined sometime in the 1920s, ancient cultures on all continents developed hierarchical religions whose hallmark was a ruling priesthood. The Sumerians, Egyptians, Mayans, Aztecs, ancient Chinese, ancient Romans, and many other civilizations functioned under a theocracy or divine kingship. Iran, Afghanistan, and the Vatican are modern theocracies. Theocracies are based on a hierarchical political and religious structure, placing wealth, power, and most importantly for this discussion, connection to deity in the hands of one person or a small group of people, usually men. The process of stratifying religious practices, in combination with hierarchical control of resources, shifts the entire spiritual nexus of a culture. We move from a unifying web where deity, community, and the individual are intertwined to a culture of separation and power over. In a perfect world, a benign leadership will nurture active connection between the individual and God, Creator, Great Mother. However, whether you believe in the divinity of a religious leader or not, these leaders are in manifested human form, and, over the millennia, the pull to transform divine placement into self-serving autocracy has consistently proven to be irresistible. I am going to make an even bolder assertion. Monotheism is deeply intertwined with theocracy. It is clear that humans understand the universal law, as above, so below. We experience the truth of this law, often un- or subconsciously. We intuitively recognize that the microcosm, the cosmos, and the macrocosm mirror one another. Sacred geometry is born from this truth. If we believe in a single, usually masculine supreme being, it seems logical that our human social structures would mirror that. Monotheistic beliefs do not automatically result in theocracies. Neither a theocracy nor a monotheistic religion invariably leads to autocratic rule. And, as I have already asserted, our human frailties leave us vulnerable to the hook of power and self-aggrandizement. The problem is not in the one God. Rather, it lies with the human draw to power over. What begins as an understandable response to the all-too-common belief of being less than, to the ever-present awareness of human vulnerability and frailty, becomes in many people a focus on more and more power in order to experience the repetitive fleeting sensation of pleasure. What do theocracy and monotheism have to do with abdicating self-determination and inner guidance in our spiritual lives? The answer to this lies in the interwoven nature of co-creation. The belief of being less than, the fear of vulnerability, the sense of lack, the pain of not belonging, are ubiquitous to humankind. While these frailties drive some of us to grasp and exert power over others, they impel all of us, at least some of the time, to hand over the reins to someone else. If my spiritual leader tells me that I am worthless, or separate from deity or my fellow humans, my limiting beliefs are in perfect alignment with the message. If the leader then tells me their guidance will bring me back into the fold, or back into God's approval, or back to Goddess within, the lure of being rescued is at least as powerful as the lure to have it all. It is completely understandable that, living in fear, we reach for the rescuer. And in that moment, we have abandoned our sacred responsibility and deafened ourselves to our own intuition and connection with the all that is. The fault is not with the belief in one God. The problem arises in how we in physical form choose to respond to that belief. How then do we step fully into a living and thriving spiritual practice with God and a priesthood, and maintain our connection to God within and all around? Here we come back to the mystic. As we have talked about on many occasions, most recently with Florence Guest in episode 36, a mystic has a personal relationship with deity and lives life as a series of sacred moments. Mystics experience the relationship with deity as living and reciprocal. The mystic trusts that they can express their humanness, including hope and fear and anger and love, without ever losing connection with God, because God is all things and more. God is the mystic, the emotion, the connection, and the unknown. Jesus and Muhammad were mystics. The Sufis are mystics. Christian history is replete with mystics, including Hildegard of Bingen, St. Francis of Assisi, and currently Mother Teresa. It can be challenging to be a mystic in a religion with doctrine that can invite religious leadership to place themselves as the gatekeepers of relationship with deity. If the only way to hear Creator is through a human intermediary, the situation is rife for exploitation. If the only way to overcome our humanity is through the grace of a leader who represents the grace of Goddess, the opportunity to control and dictate what grace looks like now lies in the hands of another frail human. Choosing to circumvent someone who proclaims divine authorization to act can result in painful, even dangerous attempts to subjugate resistance to authority. I came across an article in the winter 2017 edition of Tricycle, the Buddhist Review, written by Mark Uno and titled The Original Buddhist Rebel. Uno shares the story of Shinran, the founder of Shin Buddhism. He writes, "Before Shinran, much of Buddhism in Asia had subscribed to a clear hierarchy that situated priests above lay people. Shinran broke with this tradition in two distinct ways. He was the first ordained Japanese priest to marry openly, and he was the first to act as a priest and simultaneously live as a family man. He never lived in a temple again." Shinran and two of his contemporaries saw the Tendai ecclesiastical order as riddled by corruption, with too many monks who sought wealth and fame and hid their wives and girlfriends while excluding women from the sacred precincts of Mount Hiei. What happened to Shinran and other priests who were breaking from the established order? They were prosecuted as criminals, their position in the consecrated priesthood was revoked, their spiritual names were stripped from them, and they were exiled into the countryside. Two of the priests were executed. In his exile among the rural inhabitants, Shinran found that the farmers, fishermen, and outcasts were more transparent, more authentic than the priests who lived cloistered in temples, away from the truth of daily living. His example shaped what Uno calls Shin Buddhism's radical egalitarianism, which recognized daily life as spiritual practice, welcomed women to be fully ordained before many other Buddhist sects permitted such a thing, and focused on compassion as the practice to move toward enlightenment. Shinran apprehended the dangerous distortions that arise when spiritual leaders control the resources, money, education, land, political positions, holiness, and isolate themselves through a hierarchy that demeans all others. The isolation implies that they have become the gatekeepers to enlightenment and the rewards of a spiritual life. Shinran not only understood, but demonstrated that nothing could be further from the truth. The historical progression of monotheism was simultaneous with the evolution of transportation and the expansion of human experience beyond the boundaries of the ancestral ground. This process was neither linear nor lockstepped. Human processes never are, for no matter how much we believe we are above them, the natural laws govern all things. Contrast, including chaos, and co-creation are necessary for us to manifest what we want. Yet, all over the world, theocracy, monotheism, and the replacement of mysticism with abdication became dominant expressions of spirituality. Fast forward to the present. We are a remarkably changed species. Rather than evolving in the same small area, or at most the same region, we are born on one continent and raised on another. We uproot and move from one ecosystem to another, sometimes more than once or twice or more in our lifetimes. We travel vast distances, immersing ourselves in ever-changing vibrational fields with little time for adjustment and alignment. Even if we don't move, we are surrounded by those who do. And I'm not just talking about the people around us. The plants, The animals, the fish, the birds, the insects, the microbes that coexist with us include migrants, visitors from far-off places come to live and thrive in our communities side by side with us. This peripatetic quality of modern life is a natural invitation to evolution, diversity, and creativity. We have moved from generations of embedded, culturally endemic religions shaped by consistent local vibration to an existence where religions are impacted by a dynamic, kaleidoscopic environment created by our worldwide connections and awareness. This shift is an invitation to remarkable and powerful expansion and greater diversity in our co-creation. It is also a transformation that has outstripped the myriad adaptive responses within all of us. Our minds, our beliefs, our bodies, our connections to community and ourselves have been powerfully challenged by the evolution of our vibrational environs. This evolution is an ongoing process that has been with us from the advent of Earth. With that acknowledgement, I would argue that this elaboration of our existence has become ever more rapid over the millennia, in large part due to our own efforts. Such rapid change is destabilizing. A natural human response to destabilization is to reach out for something to grab onto, something external to anchor us. For many people, that becomes not deity, not God, not goddess, but another human who presents as teacher, leader, priest, rabbi, or God on earth. The fear that arises with disorientation and instability is a breeding ground for abdication. Cult leaders recognize and capitalize on the surrender of self-governance. We ask ourselves how someone can choose to commit suicide on the command of another, or turn oneself or one's loved ones over to the sexual exploitation and abuse by a self-proclaimed spiritual leader or guru, or give all one's money and possessions to a televangelist and take on 3 jobs to continue supporting the man on the TV. It begins with accepting the belief that another person, including the author or interpreter of a holy text, knows better than we do what our living path is, that another holds the key to our salvation, that someone else is preferred by God to operate on our behalf, that deity picks and chooses who gets the talking stick. Let us stop for a moment and step into self-compassion. We know we are frail as soon as we come into physical form, as soon as we are manifested. Humans, like the rest of the physical world, are vulnerable. It is out of this vulnerability that contrast arises. We can fail. We can cease to exist in physical form. We can be moved. We can be harmed. And by we, I mean all physical things. There is nothing constant but change, and change means endings and alterations. Only the cosmic potential is beyond change. Yet it is out of potential that change itself arises. It is understandable that fear will arise in the face of change. We have looked into the challenge of change in other episodes. Change is death of a sort, a coming to an end in one way or another. How we respond to instability and to change is nothing more nor less than spiritual practice. Instability is a form of contrast, and contrast is the instigator of co-creating. Change that arises from outside our control is also a form of contrast. Change that we initiate is co-creation. If our responses to instability and others' manifestations is spiritual practice, and self-initiated change is co-creation, let's be courageous, let's be daring, let's be our whole, shining, sacred selves, trading in abdication for greater connection with deity, for expansion, for genuine and abiding relief, for joy and love. Mystics have offered us a guide for how to do just that. Religious texts, interpreters, and leaders frequently fall prey to false dichotomies. What we are told is that there is a right way and a wrong way to reach God, to understand a transmission, to worship. If we understand diversity as the outcome of co-creation, we are left with an awareness that dichotomies cannot be the only approach to spiritual truth. It's much more complicated. If we recognize that Creator is in all things and that all things are in Creator, then humans' dividing lines don't really apply. To say that I'm on the right path and you are on the wrong path is to say that there is a path within God and a path outside of God. Mystics embrace the underlying capital T truths of their chosen religion while releasing the specifics of the overarching religion, choosing instead to go directly to the source to find their guidance. They don't find a need to argue that you need to join their team. All teams get to play from this perspective. You follow your direct guidance from Allah, and they will follow theirs. And it is all the same in the biggest scheme of things because it is all Creator in the end. When some of us are presented with this idea of taking one's own path, we are disheartened by a belief that the mystic's path is synonymous with the hermit's path. We see ourselves cast out, wandering in the woods, alone. We have deity, but we do not have companions. While some mystics are also hermits, this is not the only way to find one's own path. And here's where eclecticism comes into play. Here we are in a new environment where we are moving through shifting vibrational fields. We have the freedom to choose a spiritual practice and path that is very different than that of our community, our family, our ancestors. How do we find solid ground amidst the changeability? I believe we are being invited to create the stability within. I have been told that this is the call from the age of Aquarius. However we might label it, if we are looking for continuity in an external environment of change, we must be the source of the continuity for ourselves. That doesn't mean, however, that we must come up with our practices from scratch, nor that we must be separate or are separate from other seekers. The mystics demonstrate that we can exist within a doctrine-led community and connect with others in that community and still have our personal spiritual paths. That is one option. Another possibility is to gather wisdom from different sources and weave the collection of practices, metaphors, understandings, and inspirations together with the fundamental truths that exist in all spiritual teachings. I have seen so many spiritual coaches, gurus, clergy, and lay people criticize eclecticism. Eclectics are characterized as dabblers, flitting from one spiritual camp to another, too lazy or undisciplined to stick with the tough process of developing the required skills, mindset, and practices. I believe there are many people who dabble or flit, and many more who are collectors of books, workshops, gurus, and modalities. Eclecticism is something different. The difference for me is internal versus external locus of control. Individuals who bounce from one approach to another, one practice to the next, may be doing so for a myriad of reasons. One underlying issue is locus of control. External locus of control describes the belief that my internal experience, feelings in particular, though also thoughts, motivation, etc., are a result of something happening outside of me. You are making me sad. The environment has to be entertaining in order for me to engage. Combine this with the misconception that pleasure is the same as happiness, joy, and/or enlightenment, and a flitter is born. If I am looking for something external to make me happy, and I actually don't know what happiness is because I think it is the same thing as pleasure, nothing I explore will ever be sustainable. I will get a quick positive sensation that will come and go with whatever is in the environment. When the positive sensation ends, I move on, looking for the next short-lived hit of good feelings, and the dabbler is born. Another possible source for moving from one approach to the next has the same root, external locus of control. If I do not feel capable of shifting energies inside myself, if I believe, consciously or unconsciously, that my emotions and thoughts are inevitably reactive, that is, resulting from what someone or something outside of me is doing to me, I am in a state of persistent fear. Talk about destabilizing. This belief in essence says that everything outside of me, all the things I have no control over, are the things that control me. That means not only do I not control the outside world, I also do not control my internal experience. I am at the mercy of all that is not me. If that is the case, my only hope is to find someone or something outside of myself that is benevolent. That is, someone or something that will always make me feel good. Not possible. The false belief here is that I cannot take care of myself, as opposed to the false belief that pleasure is synonymous with joy or happiness. Some of us labor under both false assumptions. True eclecticism is different. The eclectic sinks into a philosophy, religion, practice, or program, learning, practicing, testing how the offering fits with the eclectic's living path. As an eclectic, I recognize that there is a vast world of wisdom and insights. I don't have to invent it all myself. At the same time, I recognize that my path is unique. I know that my connection with my deities is direct and that my deities speak to me through all the old ones, the energy portals in my body, to help me find what is in service to my co-creative relationship with the divine. For me, this is the ultimate expression of an internal locus of control. I do not fear others' approaches. Rather, I honor that wisdom is in each of us and that I am responsible for choosing what will further my journey on my living path. When we are told that we do not know when we have reached a stopping point, when we are scolded for listening to our own curiosity, our own sense of valid or invalid, our own boundaries, when we are labeled, criticized, shunned, or excommunicated because we are following the guidance of deity rather than the expectations or demands of other humans, we are being presented with contrast that specifically invites us into self-awareness and self-support. We need to question. Questioning is an important spiritual practice. When anyone tells us that we are not allowed to question, it helps to recognize that this restrictive response to our questioning arises from the other person's instability and fear, and that the repression of our questioning is really a demand that we abdicate our personal responsibility, self-determination, and inner guidance. How do people end up relinquishing their money, their own safety and well-being, their integrity, the safety and well-being of their children, their own lives to abusive, self-proclaimed spiritual leaders? It all starts with one small abdication of personal responsibility, one simple decision that someone else is preferred by deity in this particular situation, one choice to ignore the discomfort that is arising because our sacred bodies and our singing hearts know that this choice is not in alignment with our whole selves. Each time we choose to compromise the gentle internal guidance in order to fit in, to make someone else happy, to try to control someone else's perception of us, to avoid consequences or responsibility, we have set up a tiny vibration of interference that impedes our ability to experience Creator within and all around. Deity is still there. Goddess is still within us. God is still experiencing everything right along with us. It is up to us to choose love over fear, and to know that when we are confused, when we choose out of fear rather than out of love, that love does not end. It is never too late to find our way back to our living path. I want to leave you with one final idea. We know ultimately that we are never alone. Creator is always within us and all around us. What I invite you to consider is that we may also be accompanied by other seekers. The evolution of spiritual practice from a communal shared ritual to each of us having our unique living path does not preclude connecting with others. In fact, the other part of this process is to weave our individual paths into a new web of spiritual energy, finding the places where our wisdom overlaps and joining in communal practices at those intersections. In this process, we co-create a living, evolving tapestry of spirit in the physical world that has the potential to usher in new ways of being and manifesting our world together. Are there places where you find yourself abdicating inner guidance? Do you feel uncertain about where inner guidance rests within you? Would you like to explore new or expanded ways to harmonize different teachings you are exploring? I am holding a dedicated space just for you to find the answers you hold within you. Connect with me to ignite your inner wisdom and light the way forward on your living path. You can reach me via my website or email or on Facebook or Instagram at Caravan of Dreams MT. Our music is used by permission of the artist, Sean Phoenix. Thank you, Sean. And thank you to Bozeman Public Library for the Workbench Sound Studio located in beautiful downtown Bozeman, Montana. If you would like to learn more about allowing and how to find your unique style of manifesting, please visit my website, caravanofdreamsmt.com, or email me at dancingwitchmt@gmail.com. This is Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch. Till next time, blessed be.